Okay. Okay, here we are again in Pirkei Avot. We are in chapter 3. If you're using the Sepharia, that will put you at 312. If you were using my edition, that's 317. Again, the different editions divide up the Mishnahs a little bit differently. Um, it's always makes things a little bit difficult. Okay, we're up to Rabbi Yishmael. I think we maybe did this one, but I wanted to add a couple of stuff, add a few things while we're at it. So, and as I pointed out, Yishmael, um, the son of the name Yishmael, was probably a fairly common Jewish name until the advent of Islam, I would guess. Um, you don't see it much after the 600s, and that makes sense. That makes sense, I guess. Although I think it's a pity. I think if I had a male son, I was considering naming him Ishmael, but I didn't have a male son, so what can I say? Rabbi Yishmael Omer. Rabbi Yishmael says, "Have kal l'rosh v'noach l'tishchoret." Now, actually, the language here is very obscure. Um, and while the translations kind of, that's the problem with translations. Translations kind of smooth a lot of stuff out. And but in actuality, this is not an easy sentence to translate. So Havek kal larosh means literally be light to the head. Okay, so that's a strange expression, right? To be light to the head. Um, so there are lots of different ways to understand that. The word kal can mean light, but it can also mean nimble, right? To be nimble, to be flexible. Um, Like when an animal is described as kal, it means that the animal is graceful and is able to move easily. Um, Kal can also mean to be light, as in to take oneself, lightly. Um, And Rosh, the head, could mean lots of things, but it could mean to somebody who is a superior to you. So the way people usually understand this verse is that one should be flexible with one's superiors. Okay, so with the people who are over you, you should be flexible. V'noach litishcharet, and you should be pleasing or pleasant to Tishchard. Now, Tishchard literally means being black. Okay, so what does that mean? With the black one. Well, what does that mean? So, the standard way of understanding this is that this is referring to somebody who's young, right? Somebody who still has black hair, because of course most people in the Middle East have black hair. um, right, have black hair. And if you're young, you have black hair. If you're old, you have gray hair. And so this is so to a superior, right, to somebody who's older than you or has more authority to you, that you should be easygoing. And you should be pleasant to somebody, you should be pleasant to the people who are younger than you, right? The people who still have black hair. That's one way of understanding it. Now, there is a completely different way of understanding it. The Bartanura, which is probably the go-to commentator, he's an Italian commentator, medieval commentator on the Mishnah. He offers another alternative, and he says that Rosh here can mean in the beginning of your life. So he says, in the beginning of your life, you have to be nimble in the service of God, right? When you're still young and flexible, right? And you can still get a lot of stuff done, right? Then you should be nimble. You should be always looking for, looking for interesting and cool ways to serve God. He says, but when you become a tishcharet, when you become black in the face, which is not a good thing, right? When you become older and jaded, right? I guess jaded must mean like turning green, like developing a patina. So once you start developing your patina of age, then you should be noach, pleasant, right? You can't be nimble anymore, right? You don't have the flexibility anymore, but at least be pleasant. In case it's just that's kind of an off interpretation, but the Barthes does give it. Um, oh, jade is just calcified and rigid. Oh, so like petrified? Is that? Oh, that's interesting. Okay. I don't know anything about jade. Maybe I need to learn about jade. Um, See all the research I have to do here. Uh, but so usually people understand this as being about social behavior. So you should be you should be light and yielding and flexible with those above you. You should be pleasant to those who are younger than you. V'havei mikabel et kol ha'adam b'simcha, and you should receive every person with simcha, with happiness. And before, by the way, I think we had earlier where it said b'savar panim, with a pleasant face, right? With a pleasant. We should receive everybody with a pleasant face, and now it says we should receive everybody with with happiness. And it'd be interesting to think about the difference between the two. Savar panim with a pleasant face is something which is on the outside. Simcha is something which is on the inside. To receive a person, um, uh, not just with the appearance of pleasantness, just to be pleasant, but to be really happy to see them. This is probably, unfortunately, religious people. I don't know what to say. I mean, if you go to religious neighborhoods in Israel in particular, you're unlikely to see a lot of smiling reception. It's not exactly. This is not everybody's favorite Mishnah, apparently. Um, um, you know, I don't know why that is, but there is sort of the grumpy religious face. I don't know exactly how we got the grumpy religious face, but um, at least from this Mishnah, right, we should be greeting people with a well, with actual joy. And mikabel means not just greeting, but accepting, right? When you're mikabel something, you're accepting something, right? It's really sort of a taking in of something. It's not just it's a much richer word than just encountering. Don't encounter somebody with happiness, but mikabel, that you're really taking them in and accepting them with happiness. So that was Rabbi Ishmael. Thoughts on Rabbi Ishmael?
I can tell you that in my faith, we do have something we call the Haram police.
Yes, yes, yes,
They'll see something, what's haram? Don't do that, brother. That's haram. No,
yes,
that is not how we agree. You're supposed to
yes.
greet each other.
Yeah, they raised those guys on a farm somewhere. I don't think that I don't you know it's not restricted to any religion. There's always those guys. Um, uh,
I,
yeah.
I did a quick look up on the word jade. Interestingly, it does not come from the semi-precious stone, but rather it is an Old English term for a worn-out horse.
Really?
I kid
Okay.
you not. Sources forthcoming in the chat. Or there's the
Okay.
thing from
Thank you very
Merriam-Webster.
much.
Yep,
Okay. Now I that is
that's
interesting.
yeah. I had no idea. I was trying to figure out the connection to the semi-precious stone or the green color or whatever, but when I looked it up,
Okay.
it was very different.
Okay. That's amazing. Okay. Yes, the Haram police. Um, there was a what's his name? There was a Muslim comedian, Ali Baba Ali. That's his name from who did a great he did a great piece on the Haram police. It was very funny. Very funny and very relatable. Um, but yes, there are those people. Okay, so let's move on to Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva Omer. And Rabbi Akiva was, I mean, a very interesting character. He was a little bit of a controversial character in his time. He was probably one of the most important scholar um, at the end of the first and beginning of the second centuries. Most notably, he was a strong believer in Bar Kokhba, who was the who was a Shimon Bar Kosiba,
Taking July.
who was a military leader who opposed the Romans, and really one of the last gasps of the resistance to the Romans. Bar Kokhba declared himself essentially to be the king of Judea, and minted coins and fought against the Romans. Eventually, he was defeated, but many people believed that he was the Messiah. And in fact, Rabbi Akiva also seemed to believe that he was the Messiah. So um, that was the um, there's a famous line that he proclaimed his belief in Bar Kokhba, which means literally the son of the star, as the Messiah. And I forget who was it responded to him and said, "Oh, oh Akiva, grass will grow from your chin. Grass will grow from your chin before the Messiah comes," which of course means that you'll be long dead. So, in any case, so Rabbi Akiva said, "Sechok b'kol rosh margin et adam le'erva." Uh, Joking and kalot rosh. Now you'll notice you just heard those two words, right? It's interesting, right? Remember it said before, it said have kal larosh. You can hear it, and now it says kalot rosh, right? Those words are all related. It's very interesting. Language being used completely differently. The expression kalot rosh, or lightness of the head, means silliness. It means silliness. So joking and silliness accustom a person to erva, to sexual immorality, right? So he said that, be careful about the way that you joke around, and the way that you joke around, and not taking things seriously. It can lead you into more seriously dangerous behavior, right? So you want to be careful about how it is that you talk. And so the thing about tzchok, right? Tzchok really means joking. And so based on this, of course, there are people who would say that you just shouldn't joke, right? Right? A person should be serious. A person should be serious all the time. You should be very careful to be serious all the time. Um, and or not to engage in kalodrosh, right? And right, Yitzchak, the name Yitzchak is actually related to schok, right? To laughing because his mother laughed. Um, but um, sometimes, sometimes it's important to laugh. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov said that sometimes a person needs a milta divdechusa, needs a diversionary word, needs something fun, something in order to a joke in order to lighten oneself up. And in fact, that was the practice. The practice of the rabbis is that before they would begin a talk, they would always tell a joke, right? They would always do a milta d'chuta, that something would be entertaining in order to loosen themselves up and to loosen up their audiences. Um, that was very interesting. Um, so so there is a benefit. There is a benefit to have a sense of humor, and um, and Kaylin, of course, providing us with quote, a sense of humor is a sense of proportion. It's true, but but you also you have to know your limits. Misoret siag Torah. So he is now talking about how how we make how we create limitations on what might be natural or what might be natural progressions. Let's see if I can explain it. Okay, says Mesoret Siag Torah. The oral tradition, the Mesorah, is the is a fence to the Torah. So Torah, right? The understanding of the Torah is an ever expanding thing, right? As we talk about it, as we discuss it, we come to understand more and more. We bring our own understanding, we bring our own circumstances, we bring information, we bring all these things to bear, our imaginations, right, to bear. So what keeps that in check? What's the siag? What's the fence? So the fence is the Masorah. The fence is the tradition that we've gotten from the tradition we've gotten from the rabbis that that kind of gives us the parameters within which we're working. And I would say that the Masorah is not so much as is the tradition, right? Masorah literally comes from the verb which means to pass on, right? So it's a kind of chain of transmission. It's about the transmission, and I think that that transmission is not so much about a body of information, but as a methodology. So the methodology that's established by the Masorah, by this handed down chain of tradition, right, acts as a fence, right, to our interpretation, understanding of the Torah within its limits. It says Masrot Siag Laosher, and tithing is a fence to wealth, right? So if a person tithes, if a person tithes, a person gives 10% of their income for spiritual purposes, right? And that's the expectation. This person will give 10% of their income to spiritual purposes. There's multiple, there's there may be more than that, but at least baseline 10%. Um, that that acts as a fence to riches. Now, what that means is complicated because you would say, okay, the simple meaning would be that it puts a curb on your wealth, right? It puts a curb on your wealth. It sets a sort of limit to your wealth. It's your wealth minus the 10%, right? Whatever your wealth is minus the 10%. At the same time, the Torah itself, um, the wording of the Torah itself when it comes to tithing is aser taser, and the rabbis say aser, right? Shetasher. So you should give 10 so that you will become rich, right? So there's this idea also that by giving 10%, right? By giving 10%, that 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 devotion of the 10% will bring you more wealth. Okay, that unfortunately has now become in the Christian circles, that's become the prosperity gospel, right? That's kind of become the foundation for the prosperity gospel. Um, and but here it's definitely not being taken. It's definitely not being taken as that. Here it's definitely taking as kind of keeps you right. The fact that you're going to have to give 10% keeps you from being over obsessed with your wealth. Nedarim siag leprishut, making vows is a fence protecting abstinence. So making vows, right? So if a person makes a vow, the vow has a very specific um, makes your abstinence very, very specific. It sets limitations on your abstinence, right? A person could say, if a person says, "I'm not going to eat anything at all. I'm never going to eat," right? That's now an eating disorder, right? If a person says, "I'm never going to sleep. I'm never ever going to sleep on a bed," right? That becomes a sort of sickness of spirit. But to make a vow for a set period of time and say, listen, I'm going to fast I'm going to fast for a certain number of days. I'm not going to eat a particular food. I'm off cheesecake for a year. Whatever it is, whatever vow you're making, it sets limits on that abstinence, right? It sets limit on that abstinence and keeps that abstinence from becoming a problem in itself. And finally, siag lachachma shtika says a fence to wisdom is silence. Is silence. Um, that if you want to preserve, right, a way of preserving your wisdom is to engage in more silence. Um, and I think I can say, as a person who talks a lot, as a person who does talk a lot, that unfortunately, in talking a lot, you can end up saying a lot of nonsensical things, and you can end up thinking a lot of nonsensical things. So there's a benefit in silence. It's interesting he uses the word shtika. Shtika um, has the implication. There are a couple of, like, yidom is a different kind of silence. That's a kind of inner silence. Shtika is um, is shutting up. Is just not talking. So sometimes, right, just not talking, remaining silent, even forcing yourself to remain silent is a good way of preserving your wisdom. I personally, whenever somebody bothers me and they argue with me and I have absolutely no idea, like I find myself completely overwhelmed and I'm unable to respond to them. I just don't know what to do with myself. I respond to them. Siag lachachma shtika says that silence is offense to wisdom, right? I know that I'm going to say something stupid, so better that I don't say anything stupid. Um, so if you ever get the message "Siag lahachma shtika" from me, then you know that you probably shouldn't talk to me at least for a couple of hours because I'm probably really annoyed. Um, yes, better to remain silent and be thought of full and open your mouth than remove all doubt. Yes. Is that Mark Twain? I think it's Mark. Is that Mark Twain? No, I think it's Mark Twain. Um, I've posted one before. My
I
loneliness.
learned it from my dad.
My loneliness is born when men praise my talkative faults and blame my silent virtues. That's so beautiful. Very beautiful. Okay. Okay. Um, so thoughts on the first quote from Rabbi Akiva? We have more from Rabbi Akiva. Are we ready for more from Rabbi Akiva?
I just wanted to comment that fences work in two directions. They keep things in and they keep things out. And it seems to me that in this case, most of these fences are actually for keeping things in.
Yes.
I wondered what your reaction to that was.
Yes. I think that that's right. I think that's true. I think they're mostly keeping things in. Yeah. Yeah. You're keeping your chokhmah in, you're keeping your wisdom in, yes. Um, yeah. Um,
I also
Taken
like
to
to name my,
excess,
oh, sorry, go on, go on. Oh,
taken to excess, it can keep wisdom out too. So we have to be careful.
yeah, that's also true. right? That's so true, right? A person who's unable, it says later actually in Pirkei Avot that a baishan, a person who's ashamed, right, cannot learn, right? A person who's so silent that they can't ask a question, right? It's very hard for them to learn. So it's important to be able to, you know, to be able to communicate. Uh, wow. That's interesting. Well, that's my son to be more accurate. It's interesting from Rothko, whose art is so stunningly silent. Um, I don't know if you've ever seen. Have you ever seen the Rothko Sanctuary? There's like a. It's quite beautiful. It's quite meditative. Okay, back to Rabbi Akiva, who Hayal Meher used to say, "Chaviv Adam Shnivra B'Tzelem." He says, Oh, I forgot to mention. Before, remember I said before, there are a lot of words for human being. There are lots of words for a human being. And before when it said, "Haveh mekabel kol adam b'simcha," that you should receive every human being that you should receive every person with happiness, the word there is adam, right? Which is really one of the lowest common denominators of human being. It means anybody who's descended from Adam, all human beings. So there can be no question, there can be no question that, okay, that you can, that you can distinguish, okay, I'm only going to be happy when I see this kind of person or that kind of person, when I see a Jewish person, when I see a Muslim person, when I see a male person, a female person. That's not the issue. You have to call Adam, all human beings. And now we're going to address the issue of being a human being. Chaviv Adam shenivra b'tzelem. He says, beloved is mankind. Beloved is Adam. Beloved is mankind, humankind. Shenivra b'tzelem, that was created in the image of God. Now, I know that for my Muslim friends, this image of God can give people the willies. I know that's a technical term, the willies, but um, there is a there is a there's a hadith that says exactly this, and uses even a more difficult word. Actually, it uses the word surah, which means like surah. It's like image, really, in a more, in at least in Hebrew, that word would mean like a more physical image. But here, that God is creating the image of God, of course, doesn't mean that God has a body in any way, right? We don't believe that God has a body, but that there is this kind of special resemblance between man and God. And what that resemblance is, right? We could argue about what that is. The Rambam says that it's rationality. Others say that it's the ability to choose. But we have this resemblance. We have this kind of resemblance to God, obviously at a very distant, right? It's not a resemblance in any physical way, God forbid. So Haviv, right? Haviv, like Habibi. Um, so he's says Chiba Yater Nodat Lo Shibra Tzelem. He says, um, and as a special gesture of love, right? As a special expression of love, it was made known to him. It was made known to mankind that he was created b'tzelem Elokim, in the image of God. Shneamar ki b'tzelem Elokim asad adam. That man was created, and the Torah says that man was created in the image of God. So it's not just so God loved men, human beings, enough to make them in his image, and even more than that, to tell us so that we could have the dignity we'd have the dignity of being created in the image of God, right? To know that we are in the image of God. And this, by the way, is if we were to choose, the foundation of a Jewish universal ethic, right? The universal ethic is based on this, that every human being is created in the image of God, even um, even to the extent, there's it says in the Torah that if you have to hang somebody, right? I mean, it's a punishment, right? If you hang somebody, it says you don't leave the body hanging. Right? So here's a person, okay? If you're getting hanged, okay, you've done something pretty awful, right? You've done something really awful, right? You're a murderer or a mass murderer and you're hanged. And it says that if the person is hanged, you don't leave the body up there. Why? Because they're still B'Tselem Elokim. They're still in the image of God. Even if they're a murderer, even if they were hanged, right? They're still in the image of God. And the Talmud explains it in this kind of with this very strange parable. And the parable is like this. So imagine you have a king, right? And the king has a doppelganger, right? The king has a guy who looks just like him, who happens to be a murderer, right? And the murderer who looks like the king, he gets hung. He says you couldn't leave him hanging there because somebody would say, you're hanging the king. So in the same way, right? You can't do something horrible to a human being because it's as if you're doing something horrible to God, right? So that's kind of a basis for universal ethics. And God loves us enough, loves human beings enough to to tell us that we are in his image. It says, Chavivni Yisrael shenikru banim lamakom. He says, and beloved is Yisrael, Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel, who are called banim lamakom. They are called the children of God. Right? Again, for my Muslim friends, uncomfortable language. Okay, it doesn't mean children in any kind of biological, right? God doesn't have children. God can't have children. It doesn't mean that. No, it means in a kind of metaphorical way, not in some kind of literal way. Chiba yeter nodat lahem shenikru ba'anim lamakom. He says, and even more, a greater expression of love is that it was made known to them that they are called banim. They're called banim lakom, that they're called children of the omnipresent. Probably is the best way to translate makom. Shnei amar banim atem la'Adonai Elohechem, because you are, as it says in the Torah. That's in Devarim in the book of Deuteronomy. You are you are children. You are children of Hashem, of Hashem, Adonai, your God. It says, Chavivin Yisrael sheniten lahem kli hemda. He says, and specially as a gesture of special love, um, they were given a precious vessel, hemda, like related to, like, for example, Muhammad, right? Ahmed, right? Hamda means like something which is precious, which is
Praised.
valuable, praised. Thank you. Something which is praised. So kli hemda, a special, a, a, a precious vessel. So and even more, a greater expression of love is it was made known to them that they had this precious vessel. Shebo nivra olam. He says, through which the world was created. Shneamar, as it says, Ki lakach tov natati lechem torati al tazovu. He says, I have given you a good instruction. Do not forsake my Torah. So what is the Kli Chemda? What is the Kli Chemda? The Kli Chemda is the Torah. What is this precious vessel? The precious vessel is the Torah. The phrase through which the world was created, right, is a difficult one. One way of understanding it is for whom or for which the world was created. That the world was created for the fulfillment of God's will, right? That's one way of understanding it. Another way of understanding it is that in some mystical way, um, I think this is even that God kind of uses the Torah as a kind of mystical blueprint for the creation of the world. Um, and and um, and finally, I have to add this. A modern Israeli, if he reads this, will read lekach tov, which means lekach here means instruction. They will read the word lekach as cake. That's what that's what in modern Hebrew it means cake. So they would say you have received a good cake, a nice cake.
That's not quite true. Lekach is honey cake, but I think it's in Yiddish used more than in modern Hebrew, but
Oh, is that
lekach
true?
is lesson.
Is
In
that
Hebrew, lekach is lesson, yeah.
really? Maybe
Hmm.
it's Yiddish. Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
German, there's a similar word that describes the word sweet, and it's generally associated with things like desserts and candy and
Oh, so it's a Yiddish word. Okay,
yeah.
I take it back. I apologize. I apologize. I apologize. Okay. And let's end with the next one, or at least we'll kind of begin it and think about it. We're continuing still with Rabbi Akiva, right? Rabbi Akiva said quite a lot. Says Hakol tzifui hareshut nituna. All is foreseen. Okay, so all is foreseen, but hareshut nituna, but free will, but freedom is given. So reshut is almost like permission, or the area in which you have free will. So everything is foreseen. There's divine foreknowledge. Okay, so everything is known to God. Everything is known to God, but still you have free will. Uvatov ha'olam nidon, and the world is judged with goodness. Hakol lefi rov ha'ma'aseh, and everything depends on the majority of one's deeds. Now, it's a very interesting concept. First of all, and I warn you that the Rambam says that anybody who tries to figure out how free will and predestination work will eventually come to confusion. Your head will explode. You'll go crazy. It's really impossible for a human being to kind of fathom how these things work. How is it possible that God knows how things are going to turn out um, when
We,
we still
we
have free
make
will?
we make an error, Brother Lee, when we think that our Creator is inside of time. He
Yes,
is not inside of time. He creates time. I
correct.
think that clears a lot of it up,
Yes.
in my
Right.
understanding of it, right?
Right, right. And that's right. If you assume, right, that he is the one who was, is, and always will be, and that he's outside of time, right, then it becomes much, right. He's not seeing the world as we see. If we see the world in this linear way, in which there's a beginning and an end, and how can you possibly know the end, right? Because it hasn't happened yet. But he's not living within that. He's not within that time, right? Within those limitations of time. And um, and so within that, right? So there has to be reshut. There has to be free will because then otherwise there would be no judgment. How can you be judged on what was predestined? You can't be judged on predestined. So there has to be some area of reshut. There has to be some area of free will in order for there to be justice. And he says here, "V'tov haolam ladun," and the world will be judged for good. Hakol rov hamaseh, the majority of your deeds. Now, the Rambam says something very, very beautiful about this. He says he says we could understand this really as wasn't meant by the majority of deeds. So imagine that all of your deeds are in a balance like this. You know, the old-fashioned kind, right? You know, the old-fashioned kind where you put the weights on one side, and you put the product on the other, and so, and on one side you have the bad, and on one side you have the good. Okay? So he says if your good outweighs your bad, you're a tzaddik, right? You're innocent. And if your bad outweighs your good, then you're a rasha, then you're wicked. He says you should always consider that it's absolutely equally balanced at any moment. And the very next thing you do is going to be the thing that tips the balance. The very next thing. And that it applies not just to you, right? But that not just you are judged this way, but your family is judged this way, your community is judged this way, your country is judged this way, and the entire world is judged this way. So so the next thing you do could be tipping the balance, not just for you, but for your family, but for your country, but for the world. Right? So you should have it, yeah, have that in mind that the next thing you do is going to be the thing that could tip the scales, right? Even for the entire world. It's heavy. It's a little heavy.
I don't care for that. I just don't care for that.
It's
So,
heavy. Heavy. Um,
when you give someone money, you make a big mistake. Like sometimes when I send postcards to the prisoners, I wonder like what brawl ensues because they think so and so. I mean, I think even though it's just a random postcard with no return, I mean, I have no idea what I'm sending out into the world, but it's just who's to say? My
you have to
goodness.
tell me more about the postcards to prisoners, but
Oh, that's a hobby of mine.
the hobby. Okay. Okay.
The
Please don't
best we
marry.
can do is be a good example
Right.
for those who do see us.
I personally every day, so I have there's a special prayer that I don't know, some Rebbe wrote it years ago, that says that you commit yourself every day to trying to tip the scales, right? Tip the scales for yourself and for my people and for the world. And so that's what I try to do. So I don't know how successful I am, but I do my best. Okay, a meet and inmate, doc. Kaylin, I don't know what to say. Okay. Okay. Uh, Be'ezrat
You
Hashem.
just send an anonymous postcard. You don't have to put your return address. I just journal at them. I'm making one right now.
Okay, that's fascinating.
Yeah,
I
and then you just pick any inmate and just who doesn't? They're a captive audience. They want mail.
I guess.
Mhm.
Okay. In case everybody should have a beautiful day. If you have any ideas, things that come to you, feel free to send them to me or to an inmate. That would also work. And
You can choose by state and age.
Yes, that's great. State and age. And in case I'll be back tomorrow for Duties of the Heart. I hope you'll join me. And see you guys later. Bye.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry. Sorry, I'm out of control. I'm out
Great.
of control.